Well, good afternoon or good evening if you're in the USA, and if you are overseas, it's late at night, or if you're in the Pacific Rim, then it's already Wonderful Wednesday. I am Bruce, Mr. Simpler, Faster, Better, and a lot of people know me on LinkedIn as the guy in the blue shirt, so I'm staying true to my brand today. And I'm actually out of Tempe, Arizona, and I'm so honored to introduce Dr. Stephanie this afternoon. I'm not going to butcher your last names. I'll let you take care of that. So, so say a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to talk about a lot of different things around organization and mindfulness. And if we get a chance, we're going to talk about your survivor story, which was the reason I invited you to come join me this afternoon. So over to you.
Sounds great. I'm really looking forward to the conversation with you, Bruce. I'm Dr. Stephanie Palacios. I'm an organizational mental wellness consultant. I also do a few more things. I am a co-founder of a tech startup. I'm an advisor on an advisory board for a mental wellness company in the UK that I just spoke at last week. This can happen. I'm a keynote speaker, and I'm a contractual mindfulness teacher with Harvard Center for Mindfulness and Compassion.
Right.
Yeah, my doctorate's in clinical psychology, and I have a specialization. It's a dual specialization in mindfulness and in primary care behavioral health integration, which I did at Harvard last year. And now I'm on the path of entrepreneurship, of bringing all my passions together and, doing everything from individual coaching, group coaching, custom workshops, and consulting for companies, all on mental wellness.
Wow, look, see, you're giving me goosebumps. Look at that. Just hearing that list of accomplishments is mind-blowing to me, but we all come to where we are through different pathways, right? And you never ever know who you're going to meet. Like, you and I met virtually through LinkedIn, and here we are now chit-chatting about what we're both passionate about. And as I mentioned to you, we were talking and laughing offline about, I'll get you this. And, you said, oh, well, normally I have to chase somebody. I said, well, I'm a process guy. So I have a process for that. Imagine that. So anyway, so based on all the things you're pulling together, actually, my first question would be to you, what would be a couple of tips on something to focus on as you're becoming a new entrepreneur? Maybe a couple of tips on things that, don't waste your time on this, because you've probably gotten to that point, right?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate to even be in a place of privilege where I can be a new entrepreneur, especially as a first generation, as a woman. It's just been such an exciting journey, and I'm learning tons, like you said. So if I had to share a fast tip for a new entrepreneur, it would be to really enjoy the process as much as the goal. So I've broken everything down into smaller goals that I can hit, every week, every day, and I celebrate every single one, and I enjoy everything that I learn as I move toward each and every goal, whether that's, getting my domain, getting an LLC, getting the EIN, lots of causes for celebration. So I would recommend just basking in that to enjoy the process.
Little baby steps, is that would be another way to map out your baby steps. And so you're a checklist lady?
I am a color coding to-do list, multi to-do list. However, I would say I've shifted from being someone who was more type A and would get stressed when I saw that I wasn't meeting everything on my list to now saying that can be okay. Let me reconsider, my level of energy. Let me reconsider what I'm expecting of myself and others, especially given what we're living in right now. And that has taken so much pressure off my shoulders.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually use a combination of, in fact, I was just working on it. I have this.
I love it.
That you can see I got lots of notes on it already. And that was, but what I find that it's almost like if I defrag my brain onto my weekly planner, And then what I do is I will try and focus, well, not try, I focus on the vital few things that, there's a lot of things we can all do, but there's focusing on the vital few things. And that comes around from some pretty advanced process and prioritization training that I've done in the past, where, if you focus on the vital few things that give you the leverage, then the useful many things can wait for another time or another day, or just, just roll them over to tomorrow, right?
Right. I love how you say that. I remember reading Stephen Covey and how you can create that quadrant to help yourself decide like what to work on and when, and how to prioritize. I'm such a sucker for those types of models. I found them really useful.
Sure. Hey, well, I'll let you know another selfish plug at the end. I always try and leave the plugs. I just created actually a little journal, which is very to-do orientated. So it's based on, some fast tips around making improvements, and then how to reward yourself with some non-financial measures, not always financially driven measures. So yeah, so that came from a lot of hard times in my past. So fortunately I kept lots of notes about that, and now I've turned it into a journal. So
that's fantastic. I mean, the way that you can take something difficult that you've gone through and make it speak to more than just the pain it caused, right? But like allow it to manifest and show itself in so many different ways that can actually be constructive.
Right.
Fantastic.
Well, and it came about by accident as well. So I'm a big believer in accidents are meant to happen, not always accidents are bad things to happen. So so it came about from a prior LinkedIn live guest, and she's into journaling. And anyway, cut a long story short, we figured out there was a big gap in the marketplace for guy-centric type journals. There's a lot of feminine type journals out there. So that was the inspiration, as it were, and then she also helped me get in touch with somebody that knew how to do that work in Kindle Direct Publishing, and that's how it came about. So never.
Oh, how cool!
How cool, yeah. Just following the breadcrumbs, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So my big memory of Covey's stuff is, and sometimes I forget this, but my main remembering from Covey's teaching is, seek to understand before you can be understood. And when I'm stuck, or maybe having a conversation that's not going so well, or sometimes confrontational conversations, I try and step back now and say, okay, well, what am I missing here? What am I not understanding about the person first before, trying to put my 2 cents into the conversation about, well, why don't you understand where I'm coming from? Or, why aren't you getting it? And, all those things that we always get frustrated about, right?
Absolutely. It's so easy to get really caught up in thinking, what am I going to say next? How am I going to respond? Or how can I win this argument? And in a lot of the previous trainings I've done for people, it has focused on what we call active listening. So how can you truly be fully present with the person during the conversation in a way where you can both walk away feeling better understood, better heard, and ideally you actually, come to some sort of resolution.
Right. Compromise, right? Now, middle ground.
Exactly.
You can both play hopscotch on the same hopscotch arena, as long as you don't try and jump into the same square at the same time, right?
It's a good way to put it.
Hey, I'm a visual learner, so I have little visualizations of process, and good process and not so good process. So,
Oh yeah, we learn as we go.
We do. And I'm a kinesthetic. I'm a visual kinesthetic. I learn by doing, and I fall on my own sword many times, and it's still painful, but hey, you just go get off the sword and go forward, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say it doesn't matter how many times you fall down, right? Are you learning something new every time you get up? Now, if you're falling the same way over and over, I mean, even that, okay, there's a pattern here. What can I learn about this pattern and how can I shift it? But otherwise, I think that's the journey, right? The journey isn't to be perfect. The journey is just to be fully present in the
Right.
journey.
Yeah, I actually have some, you're absolutely right. And I used to be a perfectionist. I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Same.
Oh, well, I had a very quiet but strong-willed lady that worked in a team I was leading a long, long time ago. And one day she came up to me and said, "Hey, can we grab coffee?" Which was like, really? I knew I was in trouble when that was.
Oh no.
So anyway, so I brewed some coffee and she was sipping away at her coffee and her name was Yvonne. I've never forgotten this. And I said, "So what's up?" And she said, "Bruce, we already know when we've goofed up way before you need to tell us. We already know, what you don't like because we've paid attention." She said, "It would be a whole lot better if you just remembered that perfect is the enemy of the good." And it's like, whoa, yeah, you got it. So I said to her, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And she said, "Well, why don't you, because I used to walk through and walk around with the team a couple of times a day. It was a pretty big team and a big facility that I was running. And she used to say, just point out a couple of good things along the way first. And then, you can tell us about your not so good things at the end. And the chances are we're probably already working on it way before you got out of bed." And she was right. She was like spot on. So when I shift that approach to, recognizing the small things, the positive achievements, the whole team dynamic changed. And it's a great segue into, learning how the organization should work, right? So that's, I know some of the things that you work on, you love working on organizational attributes. So, yeah.
Yeah, so many things came to mind as you shared that. Like, for example, what courage for that person to be willing to have that conversation with you, right? Like, that's super vulnerable to say, let me confront the boss
Right.
and give him this feedback. So that's an incredible amount of courage. And I think that I would hope also speaks to the psychological safety that employee felt with you, that your relationship could endure that type of feedback. And that's ideal, right? To have that type of relationship that employees know it can endure giving feedback both ways.
Right. Well, she'd also picked up on the fact her timing was impeccable as well. She'd also picked up on the fact, because they'd been watching me, they observed, because I had a open, long windowed space that I work from, and they could all see me pretty visibly. So they all observed what time I usually took my first cup of coffee of the day. So her timing, she knew it was coffee time. So, her great learning by her and the team that she picked her timing because she knew I was up for coffee. And secondarily, I stood there in front of the window so that everybody that she was really talking on behalf of could see that she was having that tough and crucial conversation with me. So, yeah, she was smart. Very, very, she didn't say a lot, but she was super smart.
Yeah. Well, and giving you that pulse into, your own company culture and what your employees wanted from you. And then going further from that, right? Going on from that to hear that you implemented it and you saw a change. Like, that's an ideal case right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was pretty rapid as well. I mean, when I was doing that type of work, which was actually helping people improve and company and organizations improve rapidly, I always used to have a 30, 60, 90-day plan. It was pretty structured. And I had told them that, I'd said that, the first 30 days are probably going to be pretty chaotic with a lot of changes. And then 60 days, probably less chaotic and a little bit more intentional. And then by the time I get to the 90-day plan, it's going to be super intentional and super strategic. So I'd already had that, kind of coaching session with them about what it looked like, and it was pretty close to the end of my first 30 days that, you know, that conversation was had between her on behalf of the team leaders that I had. So yeah, again, it was super smart, super smart. Timing was impeccable. And yeah, from the 30-day to the 60-day plan, it was like our momentum increased dramatically. So yeah.
It's fantastic.
So what are the tips that you have for organizational change? You know, I'm sure you have a bunch, right?
Yeah. I want to ask a clarifying question. When you talk about organizational change and tips, are you asking like how to enact tips, how to talk to the boss about it? Like what aspect of that could I help with?
Well, what have you seen most difficult? I mean, we always focus on the easy very often. What have you found most difficult and a couple of things that have to change to, empower people to have those, tough conversations, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I've seen a few different things. I would say one of the most common themes I see is buy-in. And I would say buy-in from both the employee side and the employer side.
Right.
So if the past relationship has been a bit tumultuous, the employees don't feel that sense of safety. They don't feel that the
Right.
relationship could endure feedback. So they won't be willing to give any, and they also
Right.
might be hesitant to engage in any sort of change.
Right.
And on the side of the leadership, sometimes it's difficult too for leaders to hear that actually there are ways that we can improve this, and there are things that you might want to consider shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And leaders may often ask, why? And what's the benefit that I'll see? And is it worth the risk for me to be vulnerable?
Right.
Especially when we're shifting out of a previous era when employers weren't necessarily valuing being this vulnerable with their employees. So it's a major mindset shift in the relationship between employer and employee now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's always interesting. And to finish that story, and I hadn't really realized that it was that organizational safety but I was like their fourth new senior manager in less than 18 months.
Wow.
So yeah, they'd gone through a lot of churn on the senior management leadership side. So they were pretty nervous about, what to expect, what was this crazy guy going to bring into our, into our lives this time, because they'd had 3 other crazies before, which obviously wasn't working out because they weren't there anymore. So
right. And even the question of, and how long is this person going to last? So how much do we invest this time?
Right. Yeah. And actually that reminds me, I always remember on the first, group session with them, there were a lot of eye rolling around, when I talked about, hey, I have a 30, 60, 90-day plan approach. And now I realize why they're all rolling their eyes the first and second time I talked to them. It's like, yeah, I think we've heard this before, right?
Right. We'll see if you're still here at that 90-day mark.
Right. Yeah. We'll see if history really does repeat itself or not, right?
Yeah, and I think that's an unfortunate reality for so many people right now in the workforce, with the pressures and the impact of so many different things that are going on. There's a lot of turnover, and
Yes,
so
there is.
it does leave this sense of chaos and this sense of uncertainty, which directly impacts the trust and the relationship between the employer and the employee.
So on that point, obviously, I think most people that are at least out in a business platform or watch a little bit of the news, they know there's been this massive, I think it's up to about 4.1 million people have resigned from the USA workforce economy. So that in itself is creating, not only the pandemic created an external input chaotic thing. Now we've got this internal exodus, which is creating another, huge churn and change in our workplace, or even if it's all remote, when you get on a Zoom or a Skype or a whatever video conferencing you use, is is that team still going to be intact, right? So,
Right. Yeah. It's what many are calling the Great Resignation right now,
right,
which is exactly what you said. Super high number of employees leaving their work, leaving their roles. And it's not just the employee level, right? There's plenty of leadership level people as well who are just choosing to leave. And it's really a wake up call for so many organizations as a whole, like to reevaluate what does it mean to
right,
um, employ someone? What does it mean to ask someone to work from home or to work hybrid? What does it mean to create and maintain company culture, team cohesion, belongingness when you're trying to navigate this new chaos, like you said, in addition to the impact of the pandemic?
right. Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting, particularly who would have predicted or imagined the Great Resignation. I don't know if anyone would have really, been in front of that. I mean, I'm sure there were some lucky people that got in front of it, but I think it's taken most organizations somewhat by surprise. And I think it's also the rate of the amount of resignations that have happened. So,
Yeah, I think we're in a unique time where people have really been pushed to their breaking point. And so we are seeing more unique behavior that we otherwise may not have predicted. Because when was the last time that we were this pushed to our breaking point in and outside of work? And then that's not mentioning the generational shift in the makeup of the workforce, where we're shifting into more and more of the workforce being Gen Z, being millennial.
right, sure,
I'm a millennial myself, and just seeing the ways that we're approaching work, which is so different than the ways that generations before us have approached work. And that impacts, your expectations, it impacts your demands, it impacts where you set your boundaries and how, and that has a trickle down effect on this, we're seeing the Great Resignation.
right. Well, I love working with what I call high potential leaders who are typically in that generation behind me. And yeah, it's also, I think, a shock on the other side that a lot of people, a generation behind the baby boomers, they don't realize that, for the first time ever in American history, the baby boomers haven't been the largest sector of the employed economy. And so there's an assumption also from both ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why, to be personal and selfish, I went out of my way to I was an analog and I had to learn to become a digital. And so I purposely had a coach who was a generation before me, younger than me, because I wanted to, first of all, understand the way that he thought about technology and using digital tools, but more importantly, to really understand how to learn quickly as well. Because if I'd done it under Bruce Power, it probably would have taken me a couple of years to learn what I learned in 4 months. So,
Right. I find that to be fantastic. I mean, not at all unselfish, like you mentioned. If anything, I mean, that's another process, right? That you're developing is identify your growth areas and then create an action plan, which is what can I do in order to help bridge this gap? What's within my means? And how can I, really invest in this resource in a way that speaks to what I'm looking for? So like you just said, like that was something that occurred to you, that investing in someone who is part of that younger generation, who might have more fluidity or fluency in this type of tech, might be a better suited coach for you because you are looking to optimize your ability the quickest way possible. That to me sounds like smart planning.
Well, some people say I am a smarty pants. So. But I try to be smarty pants in a positive way, so.
Fantastic.
But it is interesting because what I found is that also working with, I love to work with people a generation or two younger than me, and I'm electrified by their energy. So it's amazing how their energy is very different and mine is different. But if you can learn to absorb that in a very positive manner, it's like, it's just like getting a double shot. It's awesome. I love it.
I mean, we can all learn from each other, right? Regardless, even you're always going to have differences between people, even within the same generation. So it goes back to that idea of being really open to learning from each other, active listening, like you mentioned earlier. All those play a crucial piece.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's active listening, and then you also mentioned it's the learn by doing. Don't get past yourself a little bit, and don't worry about if you fail forward. As long as failing backwards is not good, but failing forwards, you're still going to make progress. It might be baby steps, but you're still going to get there if you keep failing forward. So.
Yeah, exactly. And, I even oftentimes have challenged people even on something as logistical as like, what do you define as failing backwards? Like, why can't that still be, can we reframe that in a way that we can still elicit something from this that's valuable, that can still educate you in any way that will enrich you for the next time? Because that would still be qualifying as failing forward.
Yeah, and I don't know if this helps, particularly the baby boomers that may be listening and not commenting, or just listening afterwards. But what I found is that if you can put things in 3 pillars, which is if you can learn and if you can prosper, not necessarily prosper financially, but prosper through gaining knowledge, and learn, prosper, and grow. Those are the 3 pillars that I try and put everything I do into and under, because I have that process thinking, so I have to be organized in some buckets. I can't be totally random, because that doesn't work so well for me. But if I can organize my processes in buckets and themes and pillars, then yeah, if you keep learning and prospering and growing, and you do that little by little in baby steps, by the end of the year, you will be so much further forward. It's amazing. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would say my method includes this layer of considering like how aligned what you're doing and what you're learning, how aligned that is with the life you actually want to be living. And I would say that's really at the core of the work that I do. Is growth is fantastic. I'm very growth oriented. I love learning. Obviously, I've been in school almost my entire life.
Oh, yeah.
But it had to be about something about which I was passionate, and I was very intentional about that. And so I'm biased in that I find it to be so important. But I use it in my work with others. It's that question of, do you wake up in the morning feeling that you're living a life that's meaningful, that's authentic, that brings you joy? And I'm not saying that we're all going to have 10 out of 10 days. We're all going to have really crappy days and weeks and months. We've all been there. We all will be there.
Right.
But can you say, I understand why I'm doing this? This is serving a greater purpose that really brings me meaning. In our field, we call it like values-driven work. So like values-driven decision-making, values alignment. I found that when people can truly see the connection between what they do in the day-to-day and what they're doing at work and what they're learning through their failures, and they can connect all of that to a core value that brings them meaning, it really helps create this lens through which they see things, where they can be grateful, they can cultivate gratitude, they can cultivate growth, they can cultivate understanding. When those things are missing, I have found it's often because there's a lack of alignment there. And so that's something I tend to really look for.
Yeah. So if you're short of horsepower or short of energy, here, I'm going to show you. I'll flip so my intentional stuff is like right there. See my 2022 vision board.
Love it.
It's all picture orientated with a few.
You said you're a visual learner. Yeah.
I am a visual learner, and I'm a kinesthetic because I put it together by, because I needed to, find the pictures, find the picture pins, I had to go to Michael's for the first time ever in my life.
I love Michael's. It's such a good craft store.
Oh yeah, but so overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, like, and I had to ask, like, where do I find this? And I'd find this, and then it'd be, okay, that's not logical. The pins aren't where the poster boards are. So,
right.
So I went round and round, my little mission to find all the supplies took me about probably 45 minutes, but I was a little sidebar. I was actually blown away by how many different crafty type, gizmos and gadgets. I mean, it's an unbelievable story.
I find my experience in Michael's tends to be like people's experiences in Target. They'll say like, next thing you know, 2 hours have gone by. You don't know where the time went. You look at your receipt and you ask yourself, how did I spend this much?
Right.
I have that happen when I go to Michael's.
Yeah. I mean, if you're creative or craft based, I mean, it's like, just overwhelming, but in a positive way. There's amazing gizmos that store comes up with. It's like, how did you think of that, right? And how many arrays of different colors can you get?
And the scrapbook paper and yeah,
the gauges, the vellums. I mean, it's like really, really amazing. Anyway, so that's my little sidebar. Anyway, so yeah. So, Shameless, if people want to learn more from you or get in touch with you with specific questions, obviously they can ask questions on the recording here, and I know you'll respond. But
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Sure. I mean, I'm more than happy to answer any Q&A here today. Also, LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me right now. I have a website that is in the making. I'm very excited. It will launch soon. In the meantime, I do have my domain. It's 𝒑𝒂𝒒 Palacios Consulting.
Okay.
So you can just send an email to, you can either send it to hello@𝒑𝒂𝒒PalaciosConsulting.com or just Stephanie@𝒑𝒂𝒒PalaciosConsulting.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't you add those, when the recording's done a little later, you can add those. You can't add them dynamically yet. I think StreamYard are working on that, but it would be great if we could add comments sometimes. But for sure. Come back in and add that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah. So what's the most exciting thing you have coming up for either the rest of this year or Q1 in 22?
Let's see. I have a lot of exciting stuff happening right now because I'm doing multiple things at once. If I had to point out one, I would say that just continuing on this path of entrepreneurship, whereas before I've been doing this work for a really long time, but it had always been what I call very, very part-time. So maybe having one client every handful of months. Whereas now I've decided to dedicate my, full-time and energy toward it. And I would say it's been a blast. I've really loved it. And so I'm just looking forward into like, what is it like to be toward the end of the year in entrepreneurship as an entrepreneur, right? And just continuing to work on developing like what programs I'm going to be offering soon, while continuing to work with the clients that I already have. I'm kind of still basking in the glow of starting this endeavor. So I would say that is something I'm just looking forward to, is continuing that more and more. Yeah.
So do you have any restrictions on client acquisition? You don't mind, you just want US or global, or what do you?
No, as far as location goes, I work fully remote. I'm open to in person, but so far my clients have been all remote for the last couple of years, even before the pandemic. And so I've been able to work with people globally, actually. So I've already worked with companies and institutions. Let's see. In the US, obviously, it's where I'm based in Colorado. All throughout the US, though, Australia, Mexico, Brazil, the UK. So it'd be lovely to get even more countries that I could, be a part of. But no, so geographically, there is no restriction. My individual coaching, it's a little more sensitive because I'm not working as like a licensed therapist. I'm working as a coach who does have the training from my doctorate. So there is a little more of a selection interviewing process that goes there before we can work together, but it tends to be with high achievers. It tends to be with entrepreneurs. It tends to be also with first gen, since I'm a first gen as well. And I've really found that work resonates a lot. Women. But yeah, so I would say pretty broad.
Awesome. All right. Well, when you get your, I'm sure you're going to have all that on your lovely website when it comes up.
Yeah,
So
that's the
yeah,
plan.
again, be sure to make a note and come back in and add your website and
Will
maybe a
do.
little bio around what your ideal client looks like. So,
Sounds
and it's
great. Thank you, Bruce.
hey, well, actually, it's very coincidental. Your description of your client is almost identical to my ideal client as well.
No
So
way. That's
yeah.
awesome.
And I love the reach as well. I'm always staggered by the reach. So you never know. You
Yeah.
just never know who needs what you or I might have. And it's usually about timing. That's what I find. It's when the time is right, that person, they always say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right?
That's right. I absolutely believe in that. A lot of us, and I know we talked about this before we went live, this idea of following someone for a while, building like a knowledge base, getting to
Right.
know the person, and then finally saying, okay, now I'm ready for this next step, and building a working relationship with them. And I think that can very much work when you're looking at working with a consultant or a coach too. Like check out their content, follow them for a while,
Right.
because that's another way to get to know someone.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing that I think many of us overlook, and I was recently blessed with a couple of new recommendations that I really wasn't expecting. I'd asked for them and I thought, oh, probably won't. And they were amazing. And don't ever overlook going and looking at not people's endorsements. That didn't really say, but the true recommendations, the ones that are written. So yeah, always do a deep dive into somebody's profile and then I've actually contacted people that have made those recommendations of others because, if you're not sure, then just, be bold, reach out and just say, hey, do you mind talking to me about, was that person really that good or were they really, did they write the recommendation for you? Because I know sometimes that happens, but
Oh, geez.
yeah.
Yeah. That's a
not
really
me.
smart
I'm
strategy.
lucky. Well, at least to check people out. Recommendations, I think, are probably an overlooked asset that we all have, and I'm not mindful enough sometimes to remind people, hey, I would prefer you go check out my recommendations because they're written by real life people that I've spent real life time with, and good, bad, and indifferent. It's a real reflection of the time and energy that I've spent with them. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think so much of that has to do with finding someone who aligns with you, whether it's, whatever it is that you're looking for, and what better way to do that than to look at someone through this platform. I know for me, the clients I've gotten, I am very fortunate. It's been organic. And it's because they have seen me like giving an interview on a podcast or a live show. And I've done several of them now. So then that'll kind of start a journey where they'll check out interviews, they'll check out posts. And I tend to share. I tend to be vulnerable because that's the type of professional I am, where I want someone to know who I am and why I do what I do. And if that aligns, then like you said, right? Like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Like I've had people, that's typically what they say. It's, I saw your post, I was really struck by it. Then I checked out your other posts. And from there, we move into, this one-on-one phone call, get to know each other more. What would it look like for us to work together? Is this a good fit? I'm a strong believer in like listening to your gut, taking your time, figuring out who's going to be a good fit.
Yeah. Intuition's critical. All right. Well, my shameless plug is going to come with a little video outtake, which I've been playing with. So
fantastic.
I know, the joy of working with, other people that are way better at this than me. So I learned this from a meaningful connection. All right. So hang on, say goodbye.
So, what if your processes do not work well? Did you know you can save or eliminate massive amounts of wasted steps, time, money, or other resources? Bruce can show or teach you how. Take the next step. Visit his website at 𝒂𝒏𝒊𝒛𝒂𝒂𝒏𝒂𝒍 and book a casual yet confidential call with Bruce. It just might change your world forever.
All right.
Bruce, I'm so impressed with that. That video
Oh,
is
oh, you like that? Yeah, Trina Poole is a LinkedIn connection. She did the voiceover because I wanted to change it up a little bit, mix it up a little bit. So yes, so special thanks to Trina Poole for sure, and then a lady called Gracie Ruth Melendez did some of the creative. So
wonderfully done.
Yeah, well, thank you. Hey, maybe on your to-do list down the road, right?
Yeah, I may be in touch for those names again. Yeah.
No problem. I always like to refer. That's the spirit of the community on here. You know, collaborating and community are really important here. So, all right. Well, I'm going to say bye. Just hang on for a minute, and I'll let you know how I'm going to send you everything. So, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right.